Hello, fellow YouTube viewers. This is Nicholas, the editor of Sterling Night Gamers. Now, today I wanted to discuss how to improve a Fist of the Northstar adaptation. Now, admittedly, when it comes to American anime adaptations, we don't exactly have a pretty good track record. They're terrible. They're embarrassingly terrible. And oftentimes for the same reason. These studios that make these movies are embarrassed by the source material. I mean, yes, I'll admit anime can get pretty weird, but that doesn't diminish the fact that there is some legitimately amazing anime. I highly recommend this one in particular. That I feel that if the American audience was given a chance, they wouldn't be quite open to a few of these. I feel that if we gave the American audience a worthy adaptation, then they'll be more open to it. And I think that it can start with Fist of the Northstar. Now, superhero movies are big nowadays, and for good reason. Marvel Studios alone dishing out good quality movies and making it a billion-dollar franchise. Anime is basically Japanese superheroes. I think that the American audience can grow to relate if we simply gave them a chance. Now, Fist of the North Star is a bit of a guilty pleasure of mine. I've had the good fortune of seeing this show on Crunchyroll and even saw a few of the OVAs that came out in recent years. Now, for those of you who do not know, Fist of the North Star is basically Bruce Lee inside the world of Mad Max. It takes place in a post-apocalyptic world where the entire Earth's surface has been scorched in nuclear fire. There is no farmable land, everybody is dying of radiation, and everybody knows crazy kung fu techniques. So this is a movie that needs to be balls to the walls awesome, and it needs to embrace that. Because the thing is, Fist of the North Star can get really ridiculous. Like, the lead character has been trained in a assassination technique called Hokuto Shinken, which basically can turn your opponents into water balloons of visual. He can literally press a few points on your temples and your head will explode. And that's not an exaggeration. He literally blows people's minds. So chuck out realism and have some fun with this series. You have a guy who can turn people into gore grenades. So this movie needs to be all out stylized blood and gore with a few comedic breaks between all the drama. This is not a film that needs to take itself too seriously. I mean, remember Scott Pilgrim vs. the World? That was basically the closest we have ever gotten to an anime movie. I mean, it was stylized, the characters kept on soaring through the air using ridiculous fighting techniques, and it was awesome. It's one of my favorite movies. And Deadpool made freaking millions. Everybody loves Deadpool for all the right reasons. Now, there are a few things that I will admit that I cannot really defend. The anime was a little bit sexist, since most of the women were either portrayed as useless or prizes. I mean, this show did come out in Japan in the 80s, so its gender politics are a little bit dated, but don't worry. This movie will be more like George Miller, not Michael Bay. The females are going to be portrayed as strong characters who have their own motivations and memorable skills. Plus, I think that this movie should embrace its Japanese heritage. Have the characters say some Japanese phrase. Give us some little bilingual bonuses. Omae mo shinduru. They're always fun. Now, the story is pretty simple. It is our lead character Kenshiro, the savior of Century's End, traversing the wastelands and killing any person who stops him from saving his beloved Yuria. So a little bit of Super Mario Brothers in there. Kenshiro is saving his princess. Now, at first, that does sound a little bit dated. The kind of plot line that Americans have grown tired of, and they are right. So we're going to make it interesting. I think that the first movie should cover at least the first season of the anime. Now, the plot is relatively simple, but that can be a strength of its own. There was Kenshiro, lead character, and the main villain Shin. They have a bit of a history together. They used to be the best of friends, but Shin is obsessed with Kenshiro's fiance Yuria. His jealousy grows to the point where he decides to steal away Yuria from Kenshiro. Shin's lust for power and lust for Kenshiro's fiancée Yuria consumed him, and he decided to betray Kenshiro, mortally wounding him with the 7 scars and leaving him for dead. Basically, Kenshiro traveling all the way to Shin's domain to save his beloved princess, mowing down any mook or general who decides to get in his way. Shin has a collection of some of the most powerful and most ridiculous fighters of all time, 6 them on Kenshiro, and he comes on top every single time. But in the later half of the movie, it gets pretty interesting. Because just like in the anime, the morale of Shin's forces slowly diminishes. All their brothers in arms are basically being sent after a meat grinder, and they're getting tired of it. And Shin has already become a little bit unhinged since Yuria refuses to reciprocate his love, so he starts executing anyone who shows doubt of his rule. But unfortunately, this backfires, and instead of ruling, it turns into a whole riot, and his entire city, South Cross City, is burned to the ground. Kenshiro arrives to his domain and is surprised to see it in crumbles, with barely any guards to oppose him. And eventually, Kenshiro makes it to Shin's palace, where he finally gets to see Yuria, only to see her be executed by Shin himself. Now, Shin intended to lower Kenshiro's morale, but that kind of backfired as well, and instead filled Ken with unhinged rage. So Kenshiro and Shin have their epic battle, with Ken as the victor. But before Shin dies, he reveals that he did not kill Yuria. It was a mannequin. Yuria could no longer handle having people killed in her name, and in her despair, she threw herself off the palace and fell to her death. Shin in turn falls off the building to his death, so Kenshiro would not have the satisfaction of killing him. And the movie will end with Kenshiro walking to the edge of a cliff, seeing the sun rise above the wasteland, seeing cities being made, but some also being destroyed. And with the right camera angle and with the right body language produced by the actor, it shows complementing the possibility of committing suicide himself. So, let's talk about the characters. We'll start with the man with 7 scars, the successor of Hokuto Shoken, the savior of Century's End, Kenshiro. Now, personality-wise, Kenshiro is your standard noble hero who fights in the name of justice and protects the weak and innocent from the strong and corrupt. He was also perpetually scowling. He is always angry. His face barely ever shows expression, except not all the time. In the anime, Kenshiro cries. He's sympathetic to others, so when he sees people die, sometimes it's too much for him and he cries manly tears. But that helped him stand out from other action heroes from the 80s. He was a guy who was not afraid to show emotion once in a while. Now, Kenshiro is a master of the assassination martial art technique Hokuto Shinken, which basically gives you complete control over your opponent's body. Hokuto Shinken also allows him to push the limits of both his body and his mind, so it makes him ridiculously strong, ridiculously fast, has a high pain threshold, and ridiculously durable. I mean, in the anime, he walked through a freaking building! Now, I like the moments where he became a bit emotional, but he was kind of boring and a little bit overpowered. So, of course, in the adaptation, he'll be a bit depowered and will be put through a lot more punishment in an attempt to stray away from the Gary Sue archetype. Also, Kenshiro is gonna pull off more punches and kicks instead of just hitting a guy in the face and suddenly his head explodes. But I also want to show Kenshiro being a bit more merciful and give the mooks a chance to avoid his wrath. I'm thinking like he sees a group of thugs and they are harassing these village people. He walks up to them, tells them to stop. They don't stop. Kenshiro walks up to the strongest member of the group and easily dispatches him and gives the rest of the mooks a chance to redeem themselves, avoid violence, and if they don't, then he'll just finish them off. I would like Kenshiro to be a bit more expressive because in the anime it was just comical of how he was stoic 90% of the time. I mean, it would be cool to see him like pull off a mischievous smile. Now, you cannot have a good hero without a good villain. Now, Shin, before becoming a bad guy, he was a chivalrous hero who, like Kenshiro, used to fight for the weak. But Shin's obsession over Yuria consumed him. He stole her away from Kenshiro out of fear that Kenshiro was not strong enough to protect her from the ravages of the wasteland. But unfortunately, his obsession to win Yuria's love drives him to become this unhinged, overly frustrated, brutal tyrant who does try to hide the atrocities he has done from Yuria, but eventually she finds out about all of them and is not too happy about it. Shin, to me, in the anime, he's more of a Shakespearean tragic anti hero or anti villain instead of being just a straight up villain. Now, the villains in the anime were arguably the best part of the show. You would have the occasional Mook who was a bit funny and entertaining to watch, but he was some symbol of mankind's greed. But you also had some pretty compelling villains who were sympathetic, who had hard times. You began to relate why they are the way that they are. And sometimes they were not really true villains, but anti villains. Now, when it comes to the fight scenes, Shin needs her to be equal in skill and power to Kenshiro to keep the tension tight. Now, Kenshiro's fighting technique has a few punches and kicks, and the occasional taps to the temple. Shin uses Nato Kosho Kin, South Dipper Lone Eagle Fist, which focuses more on stabbing motion, so with his fingers and high flying kicks. Now, as I mentioned before, this anime was not kind to how it portrayed women. Yuria in the anime, she was useless. She was your typical damsel in distress. She wasn't really a character, more like a prize for Kenshiro. So let's change that up a bit. Here in the adaptation, Yuria will be intelligent, resourceful, charming, and strategic. What I propose is that when Yuria is captured by Shin, she does everything she can to save her fiance. And what I mean by that, when she is being held captive by Shin, she spends her time secretly sabotaging assassination attempts against Kenshiro and is constantly working out ways of how to escape. And her escape plans only fail, but more because of dumb luck instead of incompetence. And we should give her a little bit more backstory. I'm thinking that she comes from a powerful Nato dojo lineage. But instead of being trained in martial arts, she was raised to be prim, proper, and pretty. Her family were more concerned of making her into a bride instead of a fighter. She was never allowed proper training. And even though she did get to know a few martial arts, she wasn't able to get that much practice. And that can help the audience understand why she loves Kenshiro. Because Kenshiro is kind, he's patient, and he sees Yuria as a person and not a prize that is meant to be won. And just like in the anime, Kenshiro will also have some traveling companions. And yes, they are going to be kids. but they are still going to be awesome. Kenshiro had two traveling companions, Lin and Bato. I know technically his name is spelled as Bat, but they kept on pronouncing his name as Bato in the anime, so I'm just going to refer to him as Bato. Now, Lin is a 12-year-old girl who follows Kenshiro after he cures her of her inability to speak. And Lin became mute to begin with due to the trauma of seeing her parents die. Now, at first, Lin came off as a bit meek, but Lin developed to be this courageous, inspiring leader. If anything, she was more like Joan of Arc. It should be hinted throughout that Lin will become humanity's savior after Kenshiro. If Kenshiro is the savior of Century's End, then Lin will be the savior of the new century. Now, Bato, admittedly, he became one of my favorite characters. Even though Bato was the comedic sidekick, he was still resourceful, cunning, and had a continuing arc where he learned to be more caring and more idealistic. He's a self-taught mechanical engineer and created a dune buggy that helps Kenshiro traverse across the wasteland. And of course, he is going to have a little cute romance with Lin. So that's what I have in mind for the first film. Now, what's great about a Fist of the Northstar movie is that you can easily make 3 more sequels. Instead of a trilogy, we're going to have a quadrilogy. The first sequel will be titled The Omen Star of Death, which will cover Rei's arc. Now, Rei will be a new character introduced who also uses another form of South Dipper Fist, except his basically turns his fingers into freaking lightsabers. I love this anime sometimes. Now, Rei is going to start off as selfish, cynical, and chauvinistic, a bit of an unscrupulous hero. But then he develops into a more ideal hero, a romantic. Now, the movie will start off with Kenshiro wandering aimlessly through the wasteland with no motivations for himself until he comes across this village that has access to clean water and farmed goods. So, of course, given that this is the wasteland, it's a pretty frequent target of bandits, especially from the Fang clan. However, this village has lone defender Mamiya, who is this ascetic female warrior and uses a various amounts of weapons to her advantage. Gabishis, crossbows, grenades, bladed yo-yos, and even a Dio sword. She doesn't have one in the anime, but I think it would be cool if she was given a Dio sword. She even wears this practical combat uniform, one that actually protects her, and rides around in a motorcycle because she is awesome. She's a gadgeteer and a chemist. She builds her own weapons and uses them to her full effect. And of course, she has the unfortunate feature of having a striking resemblance to Yuria, so her interactions with Kenshiro, like in the anime, should be a little bit awkward, but should grow into a mutual respect towards one another. Now, her arc, though, revolves that she is more devoted to her village than she is to herself. She is clinically depressed and has several mental issues, but she hides it and wishes help for no one, even though that she of all people needs it the most. Of course, the Fang clan gets a little bit more desperate into seizing the village and its resources, so they are able to get Rei. Now, in the anime, the Fang clan hires Rei to invade the village, and he actually starts complying at first, but changes his mind because he sneaks up on Mamiya, removes her robe, sees how sexy she is, and then turns on the Fang clan. I don't want any of that in the adaptation. So instead, we'll have it simply be that Rei runs into Kenshiro because he's been tracking Kenshiro. Rei believes that Kenshiro kidnapped his sister on her wedding night and sold her off into slavery. What he does not know is that was actually Kenshiro's adopted older brother Jagi, and Kenshiro finds out that Jagi has been committing atrocities under Kenshiro's name, pretending to be the man with 7 scars. So, Rei and Kenshiro team up and save Rei's sister Anri from the Fang clan, but before they can celebrate, another one of Kenshiro's adopted brothers shows up. Raoul the Conqueror. Raoul, Kenno the Conqueror, the supreme ruler of Century's End. He's kind of a big deal. Now, Raoul is one of my favorite villains of all time, and I mean villains in general. Hannibal Lecter, Thrawn, Raoul the Conqueror. Now, like Kenshiro, Raoul is a practitioner of Hokuto, but he decided that Hokuto was not enough. Raoul wants to conquer the world. No, more than that, he wants to conquer the heavens. And he needs to learn more than just Hokuto in order to accomplish that. I mean, look at him. He's big, he's imposing, and he rides on that gigantic jet black horse. Coco. I think that's how its name is pronounced. But Raoul was also the ultimate anti-villain. Raoul commits atrocities. He is a brutal dictator. And yet he is also slowly saving the world. Does all of this out of necessity. People are being killed under his name, but in another way, he is also creating order. Even though he demands food from villages, he is protecting these same villages from bandit attacks. So, well-intentioned extremist. Raoul was Kenshiro's superior in nearly every way. He was stronger, he was tougher, he utilized hundreds of different martial arts and incorporated them into his own. He learns, he adapts. He comes out of his comfort zone to learn new things. In many ways, Raoul is the hero of his own story. Now, Jagi learned Hokuto as well, but he was not that good at it. Because of that, he relies more on guns and dirty tactics in order to succeed. Jagi is sadistic, cruel, deceptive, manipulative, and cowardly. He is not a good guy. You are not supposed to sympathize with him. He is pretty despicable. And he has the matching horrific scars due to a failed assassination attempt against Kenshiro. Toki also makes an appearance in this film. Another fellow practitioner of Hokuto. Toki is basically Kung Fu Jesus, except with sickening radiation poisoning. Now, Toki, he was of even greater skill when it came to Hokuto when compared to Kenshiro, but he could not beat the successor due to a genetic blood disease. Instead of killing people, Toki uses Hokuto to heal people. Even when he is fighting mooks, his victims go through ecstasy as they die. And yes, it is kind of creepy to look at. The overall theme of the first sequel is basically about impending doom, symbolized by the Omen Star. This is a movie that should be about Kenshiro's and Mamiya's severe depression and them slowly overcoming it, moving on from their own suicidal thoughts. And of course, there was going to be a lot less sexism in this movie. Now, the second sequel, the third movie, will be Fist of the South Star, which will cover Souther's arc. In this movie, Kenshiro will be involved in a revolution against the Mad Emperor Souther, the one person who, for unexplained reasons, is immune to Hokuto. Kenshiro hits a temple, makes a mook's head explode. Kenshiro hits the same temple on Souther, and yet nothing happens. It was one of the most chilling scenes in the anime, and it will be great to replicate in this movie. Now, this movie will also explore Nato Kenshi, its history and how it develops, but there is also going to be a subplot of Raoul going through his territories and punishing those who have committed atrocities in his name. This will lead up to Raoul and Toki having their epic battle. And in the climax, Raoul will win. but is upset by it because he knows that he only won because Toki is in such bad health. It wasn't out of the skill, he was lucky. And it's one of the most emotional, heart wrenching scenes in the anime. And I would love to replicate that same scene on the silver screen. Kenshiro will, of course, get to win this fight and will get to finally find new purpose to his life and Raul's reign. Now, the third and final sequel, the fourth movie, will be Successor of the Northstar, which will cover Raul's arc and will be the last for the franchise. It will take place right after the death of Saldar, and this encourages Raul the Conqueror to expand his domain into the Mad Emperor's territories. Eventually, Raul's next target is going to be the Nato Goshain, which will feature the last Nato general, Hue of the Wind, Shirin of the Fire, Yuza of the Clouds, who is awesome, Fudo of the Mountain, who is a beast, and Reihaku of the Ocean. It will lead to the climactic battle with Raul and Kenshiro having their final epic battle, with Kenshiro utilizing all the fighting techniques he has witnessed throughout the quadrilogy. This last movie is Kenshiro finally coming to his prime, where he learns to move on from Hokuto Shinken, learn more techniques than just the one that he has mastered. So, those are my ideas for a Fist of the Northstar adaptation. Is there anything that you guys would change? Let me know in the comments below. Take care, everyone.